This is Module 1, a review of Lesson 1 and 2 to use the place value chart to help us move decimals and also to move past that and just see the relationship between the number I'm multiplying or dividing by and the number of places my decimal needs to move. Okay, so typically what we have been doing is been using the place value chart to show, for instance, 584 times 10 and 584 divided by 10. So I've placed 584 in my place value chart, and I'm going to show I have 1 0. Each one of these is worth 10, so each movement up is 10. So I'm going to move each of these numbers up one space or one hop. So when I do that, my 5 is going to be moving here, my 8 is moving here, and my 4 is moving here. But I want you to pay special attention to where the decimal point is. If you notice, the decimal is right after the ones before the tenths column. So when I multiply by 10, I'm actually moving my decimal over to make that number a little bit larger. Remember, when I multiply, my number is going to be getting larger. So essentially what I've done is moved that decimal from the 584 right after that ones place, and I've moved it over 1. So it was here before, now it's one space over. I'm making my number larger by 1 decimal place value, 1 hop. So the same is true for dividing, except when I divide a number, am I getting bigger or smaller? Hopefully you said smaller. When my number is getting smaller, I'm going to be moving the opposite direction. So we know on the place value chart, this means that my 4 is going to be moving here, my 8 here, and my 5 here. So again, pay special attention to that decimal. When my numbers shift over, what's happening is my decimal really is doing the shifting. I'm making my number, one place value smaller. So now instead of the decimal being right after the 4, when I'm dividing and making my number smaller, now it's 58.4, 58 and 4 tenths. So my decimal is just switching a place. Let's see another example. Okay, this time this number has a decimal in it already, and I want you to pay attention to the shift of where my decimal is going to be moving. For the first example, 32 times 100, how many places am I going to be moving? 2 is the correct answer because each box is worth 10, and 10 times 10 is 100. So here are my 2, or you can just count the zeros. 2 zeros mean I'm moving it 2 spaces. So I'm making it larger, which means essentially I'm just moving my decimal over 2 places, which will result in my numbers being moved here. Okay, so you can see my decimal has slid over 2 spots. It was here, 1, 2. I'm making that number larger by 2. And I don't know if we've talked about this, but if I have an empty space where there's not a number there, empty space is the same as worth nothing, so I'm going to fill that in with a 0. Okay, so your number is 320. I could do the same thing as just put my pencil on that decimal point and move it 2 hops larger, and that results in 320. So with 3 and 2/10 dividing by 100, you're not really going to be able to see it because my picture is in the way. So this one will be a good example for us to try and solve without using the place value chart. I'm dividing by 100, which means my number is going to be getting smaller, and I'm going to be moving my decimal place to show that my number is getting smaller. So do I want my decimal to move this way or this way? My decimal is going to be moving this way. That will make my number smaller. And I know that I'm going to be moving it 2 places because there are 2 zeros, or 10 times 10 is 100, and that's 2. So my final answer should be 32 thousandths. I shift that over 1, 2, and then there's kind of an open space there, so that means I'm going to need to fill that in with a 0. Okay, you try this one on your own. Go ahead and pause the video. I want you to try it without your place value chart. Just try it moving the decimal and shifting those numbers over. Pause the video while you work it out. Okay, So if you have unpaused the video, that means that you have solved this already, and you know that I'm starting with 25 and 9/10, but I'm going to be making it larger 2 decimal places. So what I'm going to do is move my decimal over. There's one hop and another hop, but now I have an empty space. I need to add a 0 in there. So my final answer is 2,590. Okay, let's try another one. This is 641 and 3/10 divided by 100. Pay attention to that sign. So pause the video while you work this out and then replay it when you're ready to check your answer. Okay, let's check our answers. 641 and 3/10 divided by 100 means that my decimal is shifting 2 places smaller, and that results in 6 and 413 thousandths. Okay, you try these 4 in your math notebook or on a spare sheet of paper. Again, try it without the place value chart. Try it with just moving the decimal, and you're going to be making the number bigger if you're multiplying or making the number smaller if you're dividing. Pause the video while you do all 4 of them. Okay, I'm going to give you the answer for the first one, 915 times 10. I'm going to be, remember my decimal is right after the ones place, so it would be right here even though I don't see it. I'm going to be making it larger by 1 hop, so I'm going to be moving my decimal place over 1. My answer is 9,150. For the second one, I am dividing by 10, so again my decimal is right after the ones place. Even though I don't see it, it's still there. I'm going to be making it smaller, so I need to make 915 smaller by 1 hop. That will result in 91 and 5/10. Okay, these numbers have a decimal in them already. I have 8,134 and 9/10 times 100, so getting larger, and then divided by 100. When I'm getting larger, I'm going to be moving that decimal not 1, but 2 hops larger because I have 2 zeros in 100, which results in 813,490. And then when I divide by 100, I'm making my number smaller by 2 hops, 1, 2, so you get 81 and 349 thousandths. Okay, so I want you guys to try using the hops of the decimals, movement of the decimals, rather than the place value chart if you feel really comfortable with it. That's where we're going with this.